Hello, I would like to take you on a journey. A journey into the struggle that has defined Black Americans since they arrived in the New World. There are those that believe racism no longer exists, that it is no longer an issue, that it no longer affects minority individuals. There is this idea that racism is a thing of the past, and that racial discrimination no longer exists in modern American society. America was built on the backs of slaves, and the effects of slavery still continue to negatively affect the Black community. The chains that once bound people of color are gone, but the structural oppression of racially biased institutions have taken their place. If one wants to address the matter of American racism, one must start at the beginning. Slavery. Slaves were bought and sold like objects in auctions. Like
Alright,
this.
I got one Negro here, big tall fella. He's going for 150. 200 going once for this strong, broken Negro. 300 for this Negro. 400 for this Negro. Going once. 500 for this Negro. Going once. Going six. Going 7. 7. Going 1,000. 1,000 going once.
The scenario you just witnessed is one that is nearly non-existent in modern society. Racism has changed shape since the days of slavery. This does not mean that racism is no longer an issue.
So how does racism manifest in America today?
Well, I'll show you. The manifestations of racial discrimination have diminished in vehement hatred and shifted more towards subtle instances of racism. While subtle racism may not be as despicable as some of the more flagrant forms of racism that have plagued this great nation, it is still a barrier that bars the Black community from reaching this equal status that it so rightly deserves. Dirty looks, disapproving stares, and a profound lack of acknowledgement are just some of the ways that racism can manifest itself. Man, I am hungry.
Yeah, me too.
Can't wait to get some snacks, burgers and things, fries.
Oh,
I've never been here before.
neither have I. It's kind of.
Is that a B sanitation rating? Ooh, that guy gave me a kind of weird look.
Maybe he's just having a bad day.
Yeah, a lot of people here are having bad days.
Yeah,
No. Ugh. Ugh.
it's because, B rating.
Yeah, maybe the food's not very good.
Maybe. But we should give it a chance. We should give it a chance.
It's not bacon.
Bacon is good.
It's a good sign, It's a classic greasy spoon. It's nice.
Yeah, very nice.
Spoon's grease.
The spoon is not greased.
So, you hear about the film incentives? They're gone.
I know I did. I just can't even believe it.
What are we gonna do? I don't know.
I don't know.
How am I gonna get this movie off the ground? Yeah, it's kind of haven't even served yet. Yeah,
Yeah, I
here a little
know.
bit.
Like, 10
5 minutes later.
That looks like she didn't. Okay.
Maybe she's,
Maybe she'll come back.
Maybe she'll come
back.
back.
Yeah, she's probably
it's
back.
fine, it's fine.
She's
I'm not
probably
in a
at the
hurry.
kitchen, and she's probably got a lot of orders and things.
Yeah. There we go.
Oh my gosh, she's coming back. Hey.
Hey.
No?
No?
Hello? Maybe we shouldn't be here. Not.
Yeah. Take the business stuff.
That is an example of what racism can look like. When you think of racism, you may think of something like this.
Why did you? You're allowed to be here. Who told you to come in these hills?
Sometimes racism can look like this.
My name is Cladis. Wait, Cladis. I was born in southern Alabama.
Do you like change, Cletus?
Change? Yeah.
Racism can manifest itself in a variety of ways. Racism can be blatantly obvious, but it can also exist subtly as an underlying social influence. It is subtle racism which is most prevalent in modern America. Subtle racism can be as simple as this.
What do you believe can be done to improve race relations in our country?
Bill Sheridan, professor of political sciences at UNCW, stated, in order to improve race relations, people need to be honest about racism, about calling it what it is. In the century that spanned from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement, Black people went from picking cotton to picketing Washington. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 is a testament to the changes that can be made when people work together in an attempt to solve a problem.
How can one prevent racism?
It's kind of hard to tell what is and isn't racist sometimes. But it's being open to changing your beliefs and accepting other people's views and the fact that perhaps what you think isn't right, and perhaps that you have been wrong, and that you do need to change your way of thinking.
Why is that?
People are afraid to accept the fact that perhaps something that they do or something that they believe might be racist. Accepting the existence of racism and educating oneself on its history and modes of operation are the first steps towards a post-racial society.
How do you personally define racism?
Earl Sheridan, professor of political science, defines racism as a sense of superiority that one feels over another person because of their skin color. People often ask me, why is it okay to say black power, but not white power? Well, I'll tell you. White power is a white supremacist chant meant to emphasize white superiority and put down other races. Black power is a rallying cry meant to inspire people to unite and to remind them that they are powerful, that they are not weak, and that the chains that have been put upon them by the system are not going to defeat them, that they are stronger than that they can be something, that they don't have to be subjugated by the system of oppression that is very prevalent in America. Black power is meant to raise up a people that has been put down. But white power is meant to assert dominance over an already oppressed people. It is meant to elevate whites onto a pedestal higher than the others. But black power is simply trying to lift blacks up into equality. The discrepancies in the treatment of people of color can be seen in a myriad of social institutions, including education, housing, the workforce, the military, and the judicial system. The concept of racism is divided into three main levels: internal, individual, and structural. Internal racism is the most personal of the three and deals with the internalization, whether consciously or unconsciously, of racial prejudices towards members of the same ethnic group, including themselves. The individual level of racism is characterized by prejudice, bias, or discrimination that occurs in interactions between two or more people. The individual level of racism can include the use of racial slurs, acts of violence, or even racially biased occupational practices. The individual level of racism is characterized by prejudice, bias, or discrimination that occurs in interactions between two or more people. Institutional racism can be observed in rules, customs, attitudes, or behaviors which result in discrimination through an unknowing prejudice, ignorance, thoughtlessness, and racist stereotyping which disadvantage ethnic minorities. Each level of racism manifests itself in different ways, but all levels of racism negatively affect the minority population, such as
Is racism?
What is racism? Good question. Racism can be defined as negative beliefs, attitudes, or behaviors that are based largely on phenotypic characteristics. A Northern victory emancipated the slaves, but freedom for Black Americans was still out of reach. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, but it did not eradicate racism.
Can you tell me why?
The vast majority of Southerners were still strongly opposed to blacks receiving political, economic, or social equality. The racist beliefs and attitudes that were held by many white Southerners were only deepened by the South's recent military defeat. The major opposing force in the progressive movement towards total equality for minority citizens is racism. Racism in some way or another has always been a factor in the lives of Black Americans. Racism still exists despite the decrease in traditional forms of racism like segregation or the belief that blacks were biologically inferior. Throughout all of America's history, there has always been some form of social control that oppresses the freedoms of Black individuals. As Mr. Earl Sheridan, professor of political sciences at UNCW said, "We have this view that history is invariably progressive." I don't think that's the case. It can go forward and it can go backward. Just because things are better than they were before doesn't mean that they can't go back. Black Americans have struggled for centuries to escape from the racial oppression that has restricted their freedoms since the inception of the Atlantic slave trade. The concept of racism does and always has played a part in the cultural values of this nation. If one studies the lives of slaves, they can see the correlations between the oppressive beliefs and structures of slavery and the myriad of issues afflicting the modern Negro. Dismissal of racism as an issue only adds to the struggles of the black community. Throughout this video, I hope I have enlightened you on the subject of racism, its modern form, and how it affects people today. Thank you for watching my video. I hope that I have been able to educate and inform you about the issue that is racism. Thank you. Hey man, nice video. Thanks.